Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be covering our new dashboard feature and an overview of our control panel. I'm your host, Samantha. I'm the Director of Education with ClubExpress. I am joined by my favorite teammate, Devin. He is going to be helping out in the chat, and we'll get to that in just a second. But first, a smidge of housekeeping. So all of your phones and microphones are muted. And if you have questions, as I mentioned, you can enter them into the chat window. So you don't have to wait until the end to ask any questions that you have. We will, of course, have time for some live Q&A at the very end. But if you have burning questions, you can get those in right at the start. A recording of this webinar will be available on our YouTube channel, and you can check out all of our past webinars on our YouTube channel as well. If you're interested in what we have coming up or coming down the pipeline, you can check out our calendar at clubexpress.com/calendar, or by just navigating to ClubExpress and clicking the calendar option in your menu. You can see our full schedule of upcoming webinars and see what strikes your fancy. You can also register for them in advance. You don't have to register in advance, but if you do, you have the benefit of including any questions that you'd like to see demonstrated in our sessions. So it allows you to get some of those questions demonstrated live. And as I mentioned, a copy of this webinar will be on our YouTube channel before the end of the week. You can find our YouTube channel by looking at any one of our previous webinars or tutorials, or by searching for clubexpress.com on YouTube. Once you're there and you're enjoying one of our fabulous tutorials or really outstanding webinars, you should hit that subscribe button. It isn't so we just get more followers, it's so you get notified whenever we release a new tutorial or webinar. So you're always in the know and you are always up to date. And last, of course, if you are a current ClubExpress customer and you have thoughts and opinions on us, we would love to hear them. If you go to clubexpress.com/reviews and take just a handful of minutes to tell us what you think of us, it doesn't just help us get to know what you love and don't quite love about us. It also helps other potential ClubExpress customers determine if we are going to be a good fit for them. So if you have a few minutes, we would love to hear what you have to say. Without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right into our topic here. Now, if you did not get a chance to preview our version release goodies, we highly encourage you to go back and watch our version 68 announcement webinar. We announced version 68 last week, and it included a bunch of really exciting new features, one of them being a dashboard feature that's in your control panel. So there were a ton of other new features. Again, we encourage you to go back and watch that. Today, we are going to be focusing on the dashboard. And next week, Devin is going to give us a tour of another new feature, which is the actions button in your people manager. So keep in mind, we're going to be diving deep into these individual enhancements that were included in that version. Today, we're going to be talking about that new enhancement, plus a review of the control panel for those of you who might be new to ClubExpress, or for those of you who just want a quick refresher. So let's take a quick minute to review what we're going to talk about. We'll talk about what we're going to look at, and then we'll dive into our demo site. So the control panel is the back end of your club's website. And as an administrator, coordinator, subgroup administrator, subgroup coordinator, you can see one of many different views of the control panel. What it essentially does is allows you to access admin-only databases, reports and exports with all of your club data, all of your website setup options, and the admin side of all of those great modules on your website. It's also where you're going to find support, take a look at your dashboard, and adjust visibility of certain things. Now, when we talk about visibility, we hosted another webinar, I believe a few weeks ago, website and member privacy. So we're going to talk about some visibility and privacy settings today. And again, we encourage you to go back and watch that deeper dive into all of the aspects of website and member privacy. But kind of keeping in mind that today we're really just focused on the control panel. So we're Going to take a dive into a few different areas today. The first is reviewing the entire control panel and talking about what you can do just from those panels. Then we'll talk about all the support that's available. We'll dive into our dashboard, take a look at how you can manage your dashboard, and then we'll talk about all of the additional views and visibility that you might see when you're signing into your site, whether you're a coordinator, subgroup coordinator, or anything in between. So let's go ahead and dive into our control panel first. I'm going to switch gears here. All right, everyone should be looking at the Northwest Balloon Club. This is one of our demo sites that we use to showcase some of our features. And I am currently signed in as Martin Smith. Martin Smith is the administrator for the Northwest Balloon Club, so he has access to everything. And in order to give us a better idea of what the capabilities are within the control panel, we're going to start with the highest visibility level, which is a full website administrator. So I'm signed in and I now get my link to my control panel. Now keep in mind, right off the bat, Martin's seen that link because he's already signed in. Now, when a regular member does not have access to any back-end features to your site, signs in, they aren't going to see a control panel link. It's only visible if you are an administrator, if you're a coordinator with access to certain features, and we'll talk about some of those, a subgroup administrator or a subgroup coordinator. So again, regular members are not going to see access to your control panel. We'll go ahead and click that link, and my control panel has a bunch of tabs at the top, several panels in the middle. There's also a little counter at the very top here. So let's dissect all of this and take a look at what we're seeing here. At the very top, right underneath where I see my control panel option, I see a count of some basic membership data, active members, pending members, and expired members. This is where your instruction text normally goes on any other module on your site. So if you sign in and you do not see this small little section with your membership summary, it's because you don't have instruction text turned on. So if you're not seeing that again, you need to turn on your instruction text. But of course, you can get those metrics from a lot of other places on your site. Underneath that, we have our labeled tabs, and then we have the actual control panel tab for each of these labels. Now, the control panel is going to change based on what tab you're in, but a couple of things are going to remain pretty consistent across those tabs. For example, your Show Notices button and your Configure button. The Configure button has a little more meat on that, so we're going to come back to that in just a couple of minutes. Our Show Notices option, and this is a test club that has separate notices from notices that you might see. So this particular section is going to house all of your admin notices. For example, when we are going to be pulling websites down for just a quick maintenance, when we are perhaps updating modules and need to pull something offline, if there are any things that you need to know as maybe a treasurer of your organization or a membership director of your organization. You might recall as a treasurer, you may have seen a notice from ClubExpress to update some info from your merchant account several months ago. So those are kind of areas to keep an eye on. You might always have your notice panel collapsed. We recommend just popping it open every so often to check any notices that might be there or past notices. Underneath the notices panel, in each tab of your control panel, you're going to have 3 additional sections. And across each tab in the control panel, each of those sections remains the same. So let's talk about these. At the very top, we have admin functions. Your admin functions are going to be your databases and reports, and those are things that do not have a user side. So all of those features are back-end, back office only. And to just touch on what some of those features might be. For example, in the People tab, you have your People Manager. That's your member and non-member database. In the Money tab, you have your Transaction Search feature, which is essentially your transaction database. In the Club tab, you have data exports, reporting, And in communications, again, we have some additional databases, for example, a whole roster of bad emails. All of those admin functions are only available within the control panel, and they're only going to be visible to either full website administrators, subgroup administrators, or coordinators who happen to have access to those features. Now, there is something to be said, and we'll talk about this when we talk about subgroup administrators. We're keeping in mind that while they may have access to your member and non-member database, they're only going to see the data that applies to that subgroup. So right off the bat, we'll just address that. We are going to talk more about subgroup administrators in just a bit, but keep that in mind. So again, at the very top, we have our admin functions section, databases, reports, and only visible from the back end. Next up, we have our website modules section. We're going to come back to that because it goes hand in hand with our configure button. And instead, let's talk about the very last section that we see across our tabs. At the last section, we're going to see is our setup section. And this is what we might refer to as the set it and forget it section. These are things that you're using very infrequently after you set up your website. So we've moved them all to the bottom of the control panel. That doesn't mean that you can't access those features. It just means that you're not going to need to access them as readily as, say, your people manager. Now, these setup features include things that if you set up your website a long time ago, they might ring a few bells for you. If you're brand new to ClubExpress, you are probably very familiar with them at this point, where you're setting up your member types, or you are adding in bank account information, or even editing your website's look and feel. These setup options are, again, back-end options only. You wouldn't have a member who is able to access those features. A coordinator might be able to access those features if you've given them specific rights on how to, on being able to access, let's say, your look and feel or your web graphics. Subgroup administrators, and again, we'll address this and then we'll talk about this in more detail when we talk about subgroup administrators. They're going to see your first two panels and they're not going to have access to additional setup features. Those are going to remain with your full website administrators. Now, beyond that, we have the actual website modules, which your members are accessing, you as administrators are setting up, and you're managing those. In the center section of each of our panels, we have website modules. Now, these are the modules that are currently active on your site, and they may be visible, they may be on your menu, you may still be working with them, but this is generally how most administrators would access those modules. Of course, you can still access them from your website menu. You can access them from a couple of different places. But when you're taking a look at your control panel and you see all of your website modules in this panel, on the right-hand side, we have this switch to view mode option. That's because when you're looking at all of your website modules within the control panel, by default, you're looking at all of those in edit mode. And clicking any one of these links is going to take you to the administrative side of that feature. The admin side is what you would use to configure that particular module. So in the case of committees, on the admin side, you're actually setting up the framework for those committees and potentially adding and removing members from those committees. On the front end of committees, you would be viewing committee membership, perhaps viewing a committee web page, and really more interacting with the committee, And to take it another step further, when you're thinking about accessing the back end of a feature versus the front end of a feature, if we talk about our storefront, for example, in the Money tab, which is one of our built-in features, we are in edit mode right now. So clicking this storefront link is going to take me to the back end of the storefront. So when I'm adding products, I would want to visit the back end of my storefront to go ahead and add that product to my store. And once I've added it, I would then want to view the module from the member's perspective to actually see what that product is going to look like. So the way that I would do that is, of course, you can always navigate to that option from your website menu or by clicking the Switch to View Mode link. When I switch to view mode, I automatically get that toggle to switch back to edit mode if I'd like. But now when I click these links, we'll give my internet a minute to catch up here. This is going to take me to the front end of my storefront. And this is true with every module that you see within the control panel. So let's go back into the People tab and we'll kind of focus on some of these. Now, with our website modules, we see this great little legend that tells us what all of these little letters mean after each of the modules. That's a quick note on module visibility. Now, we've talked a lot about website security and roles and access to different things on your site. One of the things that we've mentioned is that visibility doesn't necessarily mean that certain folks wouldn't be able to access something. So make sure that you review our webinars on website and member privacy for more notes on that. Now, each of these modules has a different notation as to what level of visibility it's offering. I'm going to go ahead and move on to my configure option because this is going to start to pull together a lot of what we're seeing in our website modules section and allow us to take a look at some of the visibility options and naming options that we have as well. I'll go ahead and click my configure button from the People tab. And it's important to note that I'm doing it from the People tab because we're going to take a look at how it changes once we move tabs. Now, from the People tab, I've clicked my Configure button, and I can see on the left-hand side every single function that's in the People tab. It includes all of my admin functions, plus website modules, plus setup features, plus report categories. Now, if I select something that is not a module, let's say a setup feature or an admin function, I get the option to add coordinators right to that feature from the control panel. Now, you might be aware that there are additional ways you can add coordinators to different features. You can, of course, do it through your club or association tab. This is an additional way to add a coordinator to a feature and give them access to that. It's also a really easy way to add coordinators to report groups, which we'll talk about when we talk about our dashboard later. Now, if I select a module, let's take a module that's already active, our gift membership module. We can see some quick details about that module. Our status is active, the original name of the module, additional names that we can configure on our own. For example, the function name, which appears in the control panel, the menu text, which is what appears on the website menu, and the browser title, which is what would appear, you can probably see it right in the header of my browser tab at the top left-hand corner there. So all three of those names can be configured for active modules, for disabled modules that you intend on activating. And we'll talk about activating a module in just a second. Next up, we can set up our visibility. And again, we can adjust visibility even if the module is already active, keeping in mind, of course, that if you have folks who are expecting to be able to access something and you take that access away, that might cause some problems, but you have the ability to change any of these features as they relate to the module at any time. So if I decided that I only wanted my gift membership option to be available to members, I could change that on the fly. Next up, we have our quick link text. Quick link text allows you to create a nicer looking or shortened URL for a feature that you have on your site. So maybe instead of having the full URL for a particular module and having to share that in email communications, maybe you just want to be able to tell people that they can go to yoursite.com/gifts. And they can send a gift or share a gift or purchase a gift membership for someone else. So think of your quick link text as a way to create shortened URLs, as a way to create a shareable URL. And I can even save that again while the module is still active at any point in time. Now let's scroll down and talk about disabled modules. In any of the control panel tabs on your website, you may see at the very end of your list a few disabled modules for the tab. So what I want to do is take a look at, let's say, the Money tab, where we don't have as many modules. So in that case, if you don't see a disabled modules for this tab section, you've activated all of the available modules for that tab. So keep in mind, you may not see that if you've activated everything on your site. But if we go back into the People tab, and we click that Configure option again, we can see in the People tab, there are some additional features that we can go ahead and activate. Now, with our check-in desk or collectibles, each of those modules are both disabled and hidden. We can change that visibility, either making the module active, making the module inactive. Of course, we can leave it disabled. You would usually want to activate the module right off the bat. Now, activating a module is not going to automatically place that module on your website menu. It isn't going to send out a blast email to your members to let them know, hey, we've got collectibles now. All it does is enable the module so that you can start configuring it as an administrator, or so that you can assign a couple of coordinators to do that work for you. The inactive status, you can, of course, choose inactive as your status. That item will appear in the control panel and you'd still be able to get that module up and running, but you won't be able to add it to your website menu just yet because you'd still need to activate it. Inactive status is really used for organizations that might activate and deactivate modules seasonally. So, for example, we have an extra cost feature called a resource scheduler. A lot of organizations might use that to arrange for reserving a pool or a tennis court at a facility. So you might think of that or imagine those folks deactivating that module during winter months when they don't need to accept reservations. When you select inactive for an already active module, what that does is it simply removes the module from your website menu and users wouldn't be able to access it as easily. Now, any data that is included in that module doesn't go anywhere. Any existing reservations, payments, anything that is related to that module stays there, and it's there when you reactivate it in the future. So again, your inactive status, you'll want to go back to that after you've activated a module if you're looking to maybe temporarily or seasonally remove something from your website. But other than that, you're likely going to want to go ahead and activate modules right from the start. We have our original module name. Our function name, again, that's our backend name. I'm going to keep that as collectibles. Our menu text, when you're thinking about adding in menu text, you're really wanting to think about what's going to shout out to my website visitors, what exactly I'm trying to show them. So if collectibles is not going to ring a bell for any of your members, you might want to consider renaming it. Now, if we sort of move this out of the way here, there are a couple of additional modules where you might consider different names. For example, with our business directory, a lot of times what we talk about the business directory being useful for would be a sponsorship directory. So rather than naming that business directory, I'll go ahead and save this and go back into our business directory here. We've actually renamed that sponsors. Because for us on the back end as administrators, we know that it's a business directory, but on the front end, we want our users to know exactly what that group is and exactly what that module is being used for. So keep in mind your menu text, your browser title, all of that is completely customizable to you. One thing to keep in mind, your menu text is a field that is shared with lots of other features on your ClubExpress site. You aren't able to have more than one option have the same menu text. So another thing to keep in mind that also has separate menu text that you can configure, custom pages. So when you're configuring a custom page, do keep in mind that it might share a menu name. Even your menus might have menu names that are similar here. So kind of keep in mind when you're choosing menu titles, you want to choose titles that are really unique to the feature so that you don't run into the problem of trying to name a second feature sponsors and having to choose a different name on the fly. Now, we went ahead and activated our collectibles module. We left all of those names the same. With collectibles, maybe we want everyone to be able to participate and see everything that we have to share and show off. We could leave that to members only. Those are the options that you have when you are activating and deactivating website modules. Now, we've talked about privacy and access and security. So keep in mind that if I've activated my collectibles module and I say that I want this to be visible to any website visitor, later I change my mind and I decide, well, I want collectibles on my site, but I'm just going to add it to the member menu because I don't want my non-members to be able to access it. Well, if that link gets shared, that non-member may still be able to access it because visibility to the module is set to any website visitor, including non-members. So you want to always make sure that if something is important, that you have that behind that login wall, use that visibility feature for those website modules. And you'll also notice that any of our other features that are visible to administrators or coordinators only don't have that visibility feature. They don't have menu text because you're never placing it on your website menu. So keep that in mind. Now, just a quick review. We've activated our module. We can configure a few names. For collectibles, we didn't need to configure any. And we also can add some additional quick link text to, again, create that shortened URL. Now, peeking behind our configure tab for our modules is that same coordinators tab that we were seeing for our other website features, our admin functions, and our setup functions. So this is, again, another space where I can add an additional coordinator right from the control panel. I'll go ahead and close out of this. And now we can see our brand new collectibles feature right here in our control panel. We left our visibility to everyone so we can see our public and member icon next to that as well. Now let's take a step back, talk really quickly about what we've gone through so far. We have our admin functions at the very top of every tab, followed by website modules and setup features. Your admin functions are your databases, your reports. Those are the features you're accessing the most, followed by your website modules, the back end of all of those great features, and your setup options, which you can certainly go back to, but you likely don't need to touch as often once your site is set up and live. Now, something you may have noticed as I have poked around at different tabs is that they all have different features. And of course, even if you've only been using ClubExpress for 5 minutes, you know that each of the tabs has different features associated with it. The People tab, that's where all of your people-centered functions, your member-centered functions are going to sit. That's your People Manager. All of your membership and people related modules and membership setup options. Your website tab is going to include all of your website related options. So website look and feel, images, photos, web graphics, setting up your website menu, all of that info in the website tab. It's also where you would manage your custom pages. Your money tab is your treasurer's delight. That's going to include all of your transaction and bank functions at the very top. Website modules, we have just a couple of website modules in the money tab, donations and your storefront. If you are using extra cost features, there are some additional extra cost features that might appear in that tab. For example, expense reimbursements. Underneath that, if you're setting up a bank account, if you're setting up your organization's financial accounts, all of that is in your money tab. The next tab, and this might have thrown a few more of you for a loop, the next tab is our Club tab. Now, our Club tab for us is certainly labeled the Club tab, but for many of you, it might be labeled something differently. So association, league, group, there are plenty of other options that we have available. And to digress very, very quickly, when I'm in the Club tab, or for short, it's the club that's 2 from the very end. So second to last, right before our support tab, I'm going to select my club options. When I select club options, it allows me to configure a couple of quick items club-wide. And the very first thing that I can configure is the keyword for my organization. This is actually what is dictating a couple of things here and there. So instead of calling you a club, certain communications would say association. And it also renames that tab at the very top. So I'm going to go back into my Club tab. Last is our Communications tab. Communications tab, of course, is everything to do with all of your communication features. So text messaging, blast emailing, managing your email accounts, blogs, forums, surveys, anything having to do with member-to-member communication, admin-to-member communication so far, all included in your Communications tab. And as we've gone through each of these tabs, we can see that all of the functions are different, though the setup is pretty much the same. And as we noticed when we looked at the Money tab's configure option, when you're selecting that configure button, it changes each time you change tabs. So keep in mind, when you're looking for a specific feature, you'll only find it in the configure option if you're in the right tab. Now, beyond these sort of centered tabs here, people to communications, we have our support tab, and we also have our brand new dashboard. So I'll quickly talk about the support options that we have available, and then we'll dive into our dashboard. So within our support tab, and this is a demo site, so I'm actually going to navigate to our demo club and show us our support tab here. So when I'm looking at my support tab, my support's always going to be there no matter what type of access I have. If I have access to the control panel, I will always have access to the support tab. I may not see every tab available, but I'll always see support. So when I click on my support tab, at the very top, if you are a previous attendee of ClubExpress boot camps and drills, you'll see all of your purchased info at the very top. If you have no idea what a ClubExpress boot camp or drill is, we highly encourage you to stay tuned because we have another one coming down the pipeline. These are training events that are led by our team of experts. Underneath that, we have our online help and our admin forum. Our online help is available 24/7, of course, and it's also available across your website using all of those great context-sensitive links at the top right-hand corner of your screen. Many of you know that if you hover over them, you can get some quick access to a handful of videos and also go right to that help page. So if you are a night owl, if you prefer to do things on your own, you can access all of that right from your site. Now, this is a demo site, so we don't have access to the administrator forum, but if you are a full website administrator, you have access to the ClubExpress Administrators Forum. ClubExpress Administrators Forum is a really fantastic place to go to pick apart the brains of other admins. Even if they're not in the same type of organization as you, they may have similar thoughts and tips and questions about setting up an event or creating a survey. So even if you're just bored, we highly encourage you to kind of poke around some of the forum posts and see if there's anything maybe you can offer some thoughts on, or if you have a question that you'd like to pose to the group. Underneath that, we have some additional offline help. You can download additional manuals if you prefer to have a PDF that you're reading as opposed to reading help online, and our video tutorials, which we've talked about extensively. Underneath that, so basically, once you're at the end and you've read the manuals and you've read the online help and you still might feel a little bit stuck, go ahead and give us a call. Go ahead and shoot us an email and we'll be happy to help you out. Now, let's move on to our dashboard tab. And with that, we're going to make a couple of notes about visibility and access. And we're going to talk a lot about visibility and access in more detail. And there are additional webinars, of course, that dive deep into visibility and access. But I want to add in a few notes as they relate to our dashboard. Now, as Martin Smith, I'm signed in and I'm a full administrator, so I can view my dashboard. Now, there are other levels of access which may affect what you're able to see. Now, a coordinator is going to be able to see lots of things depending on what you've given them access to, and they may be able to see some additional items on the dashboard. So with that, let's kind of talk about a couple of things as they relate to the dashboard and how you can ensure that your team is getting the right access to what they need. Our dashboard has a series of essentially charts that are visualizations of your organization's data. At the very top, you can see that we do have a little note that the visualizations are delayed. We do refresh the data nightly. So this morning, for example, I came in, signed in, and I actually renewed a bunch of expired memberships. So if I take a look at this membership by type option, and I can see that I had 3 gold sponsors that were expired plus 3 individual members that were expired. So I should have a total of 6. But when I take a look at my expired count at the very top, I only have 3. That's because the count for my data visualization just refreshed last night. So I made some quick changes this morning, and while they are reflected in my current membership data, they aren't quite reflected in my data visualizations just yet, but I know if I come back tomorrow, they will be. So we want to kind of keep that in mind. As an admin, I've configured my own personal dashboard here because when I select this configure option, my dashboard is configured to just me. Every other administrator who's signing in gets their own dashboard. They can add in their own charts. So if your treasurer happens to have dashboard full control panel access and access to all of those charts, they can add in just the financial charts that they're interested in. They don't have to include everything. And a full website administrator doesn't necessarily control the dashboard of anyone else. Now, let's go back and talk about all of the options again. Since we're viewing this from an administrator's perspective, Martin Smith can do everything. So our dashboard option looks a lot like our menu configure options, right? So on the left-hand side, we're seeing all of the items that we can add to our dashboard and the items that are currently sitting on our dashboard. Of course, we can filter by our popular categories, membership storefront, website. And if I select that option, I'll go ahead and double click it to move it back and forth. I can use the arrows and I can also reorder my charts. I'll go ahead and save that. I can see an additional chart at the bottom. Looks like I don't have any storefront purchases. Maybe I'll adjust this. So it looks like I don't have any storefront purchases from the last 2 years, which makes a little bit of sense. Now you'll see that I clicked that little dot or that little 3-dot menu to bring up my additional filters. So a lot of the reports and visualizations that you have, especially those financial ones, will have a filter by date range option. And you'll also see right next to our 3-dot menu, we also have an expand option. So for each of these, that'll allow you to expand the chart to view it a little bit larger, a little bit broken out, and it gives you the opportunity to download the data to a CSV file and print it if you'd like. Now, that's sort of the basic rundown of the dashboard. And when you're taking a look at each of the charts, you'll see a few different things. Some of them are charts, some of them are pie charts, graphs, anything like that. The ability to view different sets of data isn't something that you can, or excuse me, the ability to change the view of these different data sets isn't something that you can do. So, for example, if you wanted to say, I want to view my member status as a grid as opposed to a pie chart, you don't have the ability to change those visualizations. And we'll talk about some of the ways that you could actually do that, but our built-in dashboard's not quite the way that you're going to accomplish that. Another thing that came up during our version 68 announcement, and we'll reiterate that in this particular session, is that you don't have the ability to change the colors that are appearing for you in your dashboard. You might notice a couple of things. One, the colors may not be quite the same every time you go back and visit. They may have shifted around. And another thing is that the colors that you see aren't necessarily going to be the colors that I would see. So there is a little bit of code in the back end our dev team was kind enough to include to make sure that those colors sort of match and go with the colors that you've selected across your site. So if you're looking to perhaps maybe, share some of these visualizations with other folks, you do have the ability to, know that your colors aren't going to look jarring. Now, you can add as many dashboard visualizations to your dashboard as you'd like, and also reorder them any way that you'd like. And the dashboard really is just a set of data or a set of charts showing your data that gives you a well-rounded idea of how your organization's doing, how are members doing, what's going on with our event registration, what seems to be the most popular category of events that we're hosting this year. How can we capitalize on that? It gives you just a quick snapshot of your organization, and that's what it's meant to do. Now, we've talked a lot about admin access. We've only seen Martin's access this entire time. So we're getting used to being able to see everything. And what I want to talk about, and we'll go back into my slideshow here, we'll switch gears and we'll round out our session today with a few additional notes. Now, we have an additional webinar, Understanding Security Roles, that goes through all of the different levels of security and access that you have on your site and what they all mean and how you might assign them. So I'm going to quickly kind of go through how those affect your dashboard and control panel visibility. A coordinator is someone on your website that you have given specific access to for a specific feature. An administrator, remember, has access to everything across the board, but your coordinators, you might think of them as that person who's just helping me with my custom pages. Our treasurer, who does not need to have access to web graphics or blast emailing, but they do need to have access to all of the financial tools. It could be your event coordinator who's just helping you plan and manage all of your events, and maybe they have access to blast emailing so they can handle communication as well. In this case, we've set up a coordinator who has access to blast emailings, the event calendar, as well as a couple of reports. So we gave them access to a report, our bad emails report, so that they'd be able to see all of the problem emails and make sure that all of their event emails were getting to the right folks. Now, because we were given access to the event calendar, there were a lot of additional dashboard items that became available. So we now got access to dashboard registrations by category and registrations by time period. So that event coordinator is now able to sign in and get a quick look at what their event progress is like. Now, when we're talking about some other chart and dashboard options, they're not just based on module coordinators, but they're also based on report visibility. So I'm going to switch gears here and go back into my dashboard. And I want to talk about some additional ways that you can control your dashboard access, and that's with report visibility. Now, when we were in, let's say, the People tab and our Configure option, we noticed that all of these report options were actually the groups of reports that you see when you attempt to run a report from the People tab. So we close out of this and we just go back into our reports option. We'll go ahead and wait for that to open up. Here are those individual groups. And within each of these report groups are several individual reports. Now, when I want to determine what type of charts and access someone has within their dashboard, I want to think about what report groups I need to give them access to. And that's when you would pop into your Configure option and say, well, I would like to give so-and-so access to a lot of the membership reports. They need to help me get a handle on, maybe a big renewal drive or a big new member drive. So you'd want to go in and give them coordinator access to some additional report categories so that they're able to view those dashboard features. And the same is true with the additional tabs that are available. Now, when we're in the dashboard, A way to kind of create a little mental cheat sheet for yourself is taking a look at the categories of reports that are available and the reports that sit in those categories. And then keeping in mind that some of them have already been selected here, so they would only appear on the left-hand side. Now, this is going to give you an idea of what types of report categories do I need to give Mary access to, because Mary wants these dashboard charts yesterday. Additionally, when we're taking a look at our club tab and our administrators coordinators function, this also ties into giving coordinators access to additional reports and report categories, as well as modules like the event calendar or the storefront that would give them access to those related charts. Excuse me. Now, we'll round out with the last couple of visibility options that we want to call attention to. We'll finish off with some tips and tricks, and then we'll get into our questions. So we'll pop right back into our presentation, and we will talk about subgroup administrators. Now, a subgroup administrator has access to the full control panel, but it's really based on a couple of things. One, your subgroup administrator may not be the person that you want making full global website changes. You may not want them to have access to your website look and feel. More times than not, you really don't. You want all of that setup. You want all of those setup features really to be controlled at the parent level. So that's why when you're a subgroup administrator, you sign in and you do not see anything past website modules. You see admin functions, website modules, and you also don't have any configure options. So you don't have the ability to activate or deactivate modules. You don't have the ability to, rename features across the site. Something else that you might notice is even within a lot of those features, as we mentioned at the very top of the hour, you're only going to have access to your subgroup's info. So for example, you see here that we have the website tab open, which would give you access to custom pages, but that subgroup administrator is only going to be able to access the pages that are for their subgroup. So they wouldn't be able to edit your global About Us page unless you gave them specific access to that. Make sure you go ahead and watch our Understanding Security Roles webinar for info on how to do that. Now, this particular subgroup administrator is the administrator for a region. So that means they have districts and chapters under their region, and they'd be able to access the info and data for all of those. And they also manage the storefront for the entire club. So what that means is because they manage the storefront for the whole club, they do have access to a dashboard, and they'd be able to see those storefront charts. But without access to a club-wide feature at that parent level, subgroup administrators do not have access to the dashboard. It is something that our dev team has on their to-do list, but right now, subgroup administrators won't see a dashboard unless they have been given coordinator rights to a report group at the parent level or to a feature, again, at that club's parent level. And again, to review, we aren't seeing those setup features. You would normally not have access to the dashboard, but in this case, our particular subgroup administrator does have access to our dashboard, but just for that storefront tab. Now, subgroup coordinators, or any type of coordinator, as we saw in our previous slide, are going to have access to just the tab housing the item that they have access to. So for example, if you just have access to the event calendar in the website tab, you're only going to see your event calendar. But as you can see in both of these cases, they also both have access to the support tab. So as I mentioned earlier, whenever you have access to the control panel, even if it's just one feature in one tab, you will always have access to the support tab so that you can get the help that you need. And to wrap up So we've talked about subgroup administrators and all of the access that they might have or might be missing. So let's recap some of our tips and best practices to make sure that you get started off on the right foot. We highly, highly recommend that you review both the Understanding Security Roles webinar and Website and Member Privacy. Understanding security roles is going to give you a background and deep dive into all of the different roles that you can assign on your site. Administrators, subgroup administrators, coordinators. It's going to take a much deeper dive than we're able to in this webinar. So go back and watch that. That'll help you determine what type of access you want to give to certain people, what that's going to look like for them. And now that you've seen the control panel and dashboard and what those capabilities are, you'll have a better idea of what you want them to have access to. And website and member privacy, we did include some info on activating and deactivating modules, making sure modules are visible only to the folks that you want them to be visible to. So go ahead and watch that one as well. We also want you to keep in mind, if you are looking to activate a module, activating it is only the first step. Remember to put it on your website menu so that other folks can access it. And something that we recommended in a couple of additional webinars, we do say it quite a bit. We recommend creating a fake coordinator or subgroup administrator to test out visibility and access. It's something that we throw around quite a bit. We do encourage you to, explore what things are going to look like from the perspective of someone else, including security and access. Is probably one of the biggest reasons why you might want to include that. So for example, if you're getting ready to set up someone with a lot of access to financial reports and you want to make sure you get them the right features, they can see the right things when they sign in, you can go ahead and create that fake coordinator and change their access every time you want to test something out. So if you are calling up Gary to say, Gary, I changed your access. Can you sign in and let me know what it looks like for you to see if I did it right? You don't have to do that. You can create a fake member. And if you noticed on a couple of our screens, and I'm sure we'll show that in just a bit, we have a test coordinator that we use within our site just for that purpose. So that we can kind of see, okay, where is this person appearing? Where do they appear on reports? What type of access do they have? So there are a lot of things to keep in mind. Again, a lot of the things that we've been talking about in the last few weeks all tie in together. So we highly encourage you to go back and fill in those gaps with some additional webinars that we have hosted. Now, Devin, I did see the ticker going up and up and up. And I was wondering if you'd like to share some of the fabulous questions that we've received so far. And I am going to switch gears, go back to Demo Test Club.
Well, a lot of our questions were oddly prescient. They were questions about things that you 30 seconds later would then explain. So we had a lot of questions about how it worked for coordinators and subgroup administrators. And then you would immediately cover that. So you covered a lot of the questions right after they were asked. Do we have a coordinator login that we can use to take a look at what the dashboard looks like for a coordinator?
We sure do. And I'll go ahead and I think it's actually set up as Jenny Cho. One of the things that I try to do to save time, because as people might know, I can get a little long-winded. I try to eliminate logging in and out to save myself some time here. So let's go ahead and sign in as Jenny, and we'll go ahead and pop into the control panel. So Jenny has access to just a couple of those additional charts and just a couple of tabs. And within our website tab, we have just the event calendar, and in communications, we have our blast emailing. And we did that as a sort of side note within your event calendar. If you are not already familiar, there is, of course, blast emailing built in. But in order to use it, you have to also have access to the blast emailing feature. So while Jenny may not be sending out blast emails regularly, she's certainly sending them out as they relate to her event. So she has access to both of those features. And of course, as I mentioned, we also gave her access to member email problems, because we want her to be able to say, why is my open rate so low? Is it because everyone's email address is old? So we've given her access to just a few things. And on the right-hand side, we can see she still has access to the support tab, and her dashboard is just based on what she has access to as a coordinator.
And can you click on the configure option so we can see her limited
Yes.
list?
Yes. So if we go back into our dashboard and we see she has added everything to her dashboard that she has access to. So even when we're taking a look at, let's say, money, we don't see any of the additional charts that are available. For example, when we take a look at Martin Smith's chart availability. And you'll also notice that she doesn't have that configure button anywhere else, just in the dashboard, so she can configure her own dashboard.
And then a couple items that I answered in the chat, but I'll just go ahead and speak them for people who weren't reading the chat. Someone did ask pretty early on when we were doing the control panel coverage, is it possible for clubs to add notices under the show notices option so that other admins see it? At the moment, we reserve that just for ClubExpress notices for important things that need to go out to every single website administrator. So we keep that as kind of like an emergency line to have very important notices that need to go out. The moderate important kind of things, we usually do that via email. So we usually try to not clutter people's control panels with information, and if it can be an email, we'll send it as an email. And then another thing that was brought up in the chat that I think it's important to talk about is some people noticed that when you select a date range for some of these reports, it'll filter correctly, but when you leave the page, it looks like it's not remembering the date range when you leave and come back. It is doing it seems, for some reports, but not others. So that's just something we'll have to take a look at. It's a new module, so we'll have to iron out one or two of those small things. So we'll go take a look, report by report, and see which ones are needing a little bit of a kick in the pants. But otherwise, I think most of the questions have been taken care of.
All right. Well, we'll give it just a minute to round out here, and we'll let everybody know, of course, this webinar will be available before the end of the week on our YouTube channel. So if you would like to review it, take a look at some of those additional webinars, go ahead and make sure that you hop onto our YouTube channel and hit subscribe so that you'll get notified whenever we upload it. We are also next week discussing the action button that was added to our People Manager. Many people have been asking us about it for a long time. We finally implemented it. It's new, it's jazzy, and Devin is going to take us on a deep dive through all of those great features. So if you haven't already pre-registered, if there's anything that you'd like to know about the action button, anything you'd like to see demonstrated, go ahead and pop into our calendar to pre-register for that webinar and include those questions that you'd like us to see demonstrate live. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and wrap us up. We will give everyone 2 minutes today for free, and we'll see you all back here next week for our webinar. Thanks everyone for joining. We'll see you next week. Bye.